be or not to be? That is the question.
Where was God? Isn't God supposed to be good? Isn't he supposed to love us? And does God want us to suffer?
10 years, you're not finished yet? Morty! Why did you do this to me?
Who are you?
Bruce? I'm God.
Bingo! Yahtzee! Is that your final answer? Our survey says God! Bing, 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 bing. Well, it was nice to meet you, God. Thank you for the Grand Canyon, and good luck with the apocalypse.
This is indeed the Ultimate Issues Hour. And that means the third hour every Tuesday is devoted to some of the greatest issues of life, because people don't talk about them enough because we're so preoccupied with the daily problems that we have, totally understandably, or whatever is current in the news cycle on the 24/7 news cycle. But it's ultimately the ultimate issues of life that determine how we look at life, and for that matter, I even believe our happiness. So that's why the Ultimate Issues Hour is so important. There's a man that I have known and respected for decades now. He is a remarkable person, a thinker, and I am delighted to have him on the show today. And he is Dr. Hugh Ross. He is president and founder of Reasons to Believe. He is a committed Christian. And I was going to say but I realized if I would have said but, I would have fallen into the trap that our secularized society has laid for us. And he is a scientist. See, I was going to say he is a committed Christian, but he's also a PhD in astronomy from the University of Toronto and a Caltech researcher in what quasars was that?
I did research on quasars and galaxies at Caltech.
Yeah, so did Sean. It's fascinating. Sean, I'm
Sean
kidding.
Carroll, yeah.
No. Sean McConnell.
All right.
I'm ribbing him. He's
okay.
Yeah, no. There's not much ribbing that goes on at Reasons to Believe. We're a more ribbing place. So.
Well, we are too.
Oh, you are good.
Yes.
Okay, that's great. But I just want you to understand. I say this because I believe in complete openness about anybody who comes on, about myself. It adds full credibility, and that's why I do it. But Reasons to Believe, does it have its own website? I'm very happy to publicize your work.
Yeah, reasons.org.
Okay, that's easy. Reasons.org. And what? I know you've written many books. What would you like to recommend? We could do a different one each time I mention you.
Well, my latest book is Hidden Treasures in the Book of Job, but probably Why the Universe is the Way It is the one that's having the greatest impact.
Okay, Why the Universe is the Way It is, Hugh Ross. I want to talk to Hugh Ross today about the 6 days of creation, and if you include the Sabbath, I guess being created, 7 days of creation. And if you are a skeptic, this is your hour, folks. You can call in and say, you know what, I'm sorry, Dr. Ross, but the Bible contradicts itself because how can you have vegetation before the sun? Or whatever else you would like to raise about the creation account. Here is a man who believes in the creation account, as indeed I do. The big difference between us is really only that he's a scientist and I am not. So he brings that vast erudition to bear. So in a nutshell, Hugh Ross, when you say you subscribe to the Genesis story of creation, what exactly does that mean?
It means I believe that God created all life on earth in 6 literal days, but I understand that the Hebrew word yom, translated as day, has 4 different literal definitions. I mean, I read the Bible seriously for the first time when I was 17, immediately recognized that it was following what we call the scientific method, that the point of view for the 6 days was an observer on the surface of the waters. And from that point of view, and realizing the days had to be long time periods, just based on what it says about day 6 and day 7. And at age 17, I spent about 5 hours testing everything that Genesis 1 states, and realized all of it was not only correctly stated, but placed in the correct chronological order with respect to the established record of nature. And that was one of many things that persuaded me that the book we call the Bible must be inspired by the one that created the universe. And that's what led me to give my life to Christ.
Very good. Okay. Now, back to this, the issue of creation. You do not subscribe to the notion that each day is 24 hours of Genesis.
I don't, because that forces you to conclude that books of the Bible contradict one another. The only way I can read the Bible literally and consistently is to recognize these days are 6 consecutive long periods of time. I mean, it's helpful for me when I realize that in biblical Hebrew there is no word for a long period of time except the word yom that's translated day. In English we got a dozen different words, age, era, epoch. In biblical Hebrew, your only option is to use the word yom.
But even in English we say an hour a day, and
right.
We don't mean 24 hours.
Correct. The day of the dinosaurs, for example.
Oh, yeah, that's right, exactly. It's a very long period of time.
Right.
Yeah, I saw you on YouTube debating somebody who did believe in the 24 hours, and I know many people who do believe it, and they're wonderful people as people, and I mean that quite sincerely. I don't mean it patronizingly, but I don't understand why they feel compelled. That's the thing. I don't know why. Do you understand why one would feel compelled to believe it's 24 hours?
Well, I've debated quite a number of
I
the
know.
leaders.
That's why I'm asking you.
And it always comes down to the issue of death before Adam. In their point of view, a good God would not have plants and animals dying unless somehow it can be blamed on the offense of human beings. And so they don't see the value of plant and animal death. I mean, I'm coming up with a book on this in a few weeks, making the point, if you look in the crust of the earth, there's over 76 quadrillion tons of biodeposits. And because of those biodeposits, we can build cities and we can drive in automobiles. We can have air conditioning. God loved us so much that he salted the earth with as much life as possible, as diverse as possible, as long as possible. That's the message of Psalm 104. And that's all for the benefit of us human beings. So I thank God for all this plant and animal death that took place before humanity.
In order to give us fossil fuel.
Fossil fuels, concentrated metals, limestone, so we could have concrete, gypsum, topsoil. We're taking advantage of all of that. Wouldn't be there unless there were billions of years of plant and animal death before us. So I kind of look at that as a gift. And a lot of it is based on a misunderstanding of Paul's writings in Romans, where it says death was visited upon all men. Death through sin was visited upon all men. My young earth friends interpret that passage that when Adam sinned, it brought death to everything. But the text is very clear. Death through sin was visited not upon all life, but upon all men. So that was the first instance of death for humans, but the Bible is not claiming that there is no plant and animal death.
Yeah, I think it ill serves the cause of us who want people to take God and the Bible seriously to argue for the 24-hour day, because then it just says all science is nonsense.
Well, it's also saying that the Bible is self-contradictory, which is something that I don't find consistent at all as I go through the 66 books.
All right, let's begin with Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. I have taught this my whole life from the original Hebrew, and it is. I can say that it is legitimate to translate Genesis 1:1 that way, and it is also legitimate when in the beginning God created. Which is your preferred translation?
The former, not the latter, and based on the phrase "and it was so." I mean, there's good textual evidence, the placing of the verbs in the sentence.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so you translate it the traditional way, and
right.
I'm totally at peace with that. I just wanted to know. So here's my question. The next sentence is, I believe it's the next verse, and the Spirit of God hovered over the faces of the deep.
Right.
Well, so there was a deep before God started creating anything.
Well,
was there or wasn't something before God started on day one?
Well, there's a verse in Isaiah that distinguishes between God creating the heavens and forming the earth. And the phrase the heavens and the earth that you see in Genesis 1:1 is a reference to all of physical reality. You'll find that phrase 9 times in the Old Testament. It always means all matter, energy, space, and time.
Right.
And verse 2 takes you down to the earth and is giving you the initial conditions. It's also giving you the point of view, which I think is important. When I debate skeptics on Genesis 1, they always have the wrong viewpoint, as if God is giving us a story from the perspective up in the heavens. But the text says...
Yeah, I know. This is your fascinating insight, and we're going to come to it again. Dr. Hugh Ross, Reasons to Believe, is his organization. We're talking about Genesis 1 on the Ultimate Issues Hour. Hi, everybody. Dennis Prager here with a major thinker of our time, Dr. Hugh Ross. He is president and founder of Reasons to Believe, and that's reasons.org, correct?
Correct.
And he has a doctorate in astronomy from the University of Toronto, and he has been a researcher at Caltech, and is devoted his life to explaining religion, in his case specifically Christianity, but I am a Jew and I find his work just as valuable as any Christian does, because it's ultimately about whether there is a God and whether the Bible is valid, and these are universally relevant issues. And I'm only talking to him today about Genesis 1, the first chapter of the Bible. Now, again, so we're translating Genesis 1:1 as, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. And I am totally on board with you. Heavens and the earth in the Old Testament means everything. So then, what's the second? How do you explain sentence 2? Now, the earth, I'm giving the New International Version, not the King James. Now, the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. So, is that after the beginning? He hasn't. So, explain to me the second verse.
Okay, the universe is created. Now God forms the earth, but the earth is in its primordial state. And we're getting in Genesis 1:2 are the first 2 steps of the scientific method. The point of view and the initial conditions. Don't interpret until you establish the point of view, initial conditions. The viewpoint, we're being told the story of the 6 days from the perspective of an observer who's hovering over the surface of the waters of planet Earth. Then we're told that the water covered the whole surface, so Earth begins as a water world. We're told it's dark on the surface of the waters, which means no light is getting through the clouds. And then it's formless and void. It's empty of life and unfit for life. But now the Spirit of God begins to transform the earth.
But it says over the waters. Where did the water come from?
Well, water is the second most abundant molecule in the universe, so I'm not at all surprised there's a lot of water on the earth.
All right, so then, let there be light, the next sentence,
right,
is not the Big Bang.
It's not the Big Bang. The Big Bang is Genesis 1:1. There's light in the heavens, but it's not getting through to the surface of the waters. Now, what helps is I believe the book of Job is actually older than Genesis. And in Job, you got 3 chapters that parallel Genesis 1. And in Job 38, it tells us why it's dark, that God had blanketed the seas with clouds that kept the seas dark. So we're told explicitly there, it's dark not because of the lack of light, but because the primordial earth had an atmosphere that wouldn't let light pass through. Then let there be light.
Oh, so God doesn't invent light in verse 3.
That's why it says let there be.
Oh.
It's not God creating light or making light.
It's uses, let there be light on earth.
Let there be light on the surface of the waters. Now photosynthesis can begin.
So we meaning the general public for centuries, were wrong in thinking that the first thing created is light.
Well, I think people, millennia ago had it right, because they knew there was a Hebrew verb for create, one for make, and one for let there be.
Right, yehi.
And here the text uses let there be.
Right.
So that means that this is the light coming through for the first time. And it really helps if you look at the Job passage, because it gives you a parallel context. And there it tells you why it's dark. It's because of the clouds. So, this
by the way, about the creation words, when it comes to man, it uses make.
He uses make and create, uses two verbs. So there's something about human beings that God makes from the dust of the earth, but there's something about us that's totally brand new. And I believe that's a reference to the spirit that's within us, because that you can't get just from the dust of the earth.
All right, let me go to calls, and I particularly want, so if I've let you go, please, or the screener let you go, don't be insulted. It's not that your call isn't important. We had one from Mexico. I would have loved to have heard that call, but I want you. It's only about Genesis 1 that we're talking, and I particularly want those who are skeptical. Oh, give me a break. The Bible's got this inconsistency in that one. Let's go to one, because the time, believe me, I know from 31 years in radio how fast these hours go, especially with somebody as interesting as you. So what do you do with the issue of light? What do people say? Oh, yes, they say that there's contradiction because there's vegetation prior to the sun. How do you answer that?
Well, if you go to Genesis 1:14, it says, "Let there be the great lights." Once again, it's not using the word of create or make. So this is the first time that creatures on the surface of the earth can actually see the objects that are responsible for the light coming through the clouds. Or to put it another way, in Genesis 1:3, the atmosphere goes from opaque to translucent, and Genesis 1:14, it goes from translucent to transparent. And the thing that struck me when I first read this as a teenager is that all the life that God creates before day 4 doesn't need to know where the sun, moon, and stars are in the sky. But all the life after day 4 is so complex, it must know, at least on occasion, where the sun, moon, and stars are in the sky. And you see that right after, "Let there be the great lights." Let there be the great lights so that they may serve as signs to mark seasons, days, and years. A bacterium doesn't need to know what season it is, but a bird does, or a bear does.
Right. So the light that is, I was going to say created, but now I'm watching my verbs. The light that
shows up,
fair enough, is not the sun.
I believe the sun was there before the 6 days. It'd be part of in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. So the sun, moon, and stars were there before the 6 days. Their light shows up on the surface of the waters on day 1, but the creatures on the surface of the earth don't actually see the position of the sun, moon, and stars in the sky until the 4th day. So those plants on day 3 had the heat and the light of the sun. It's just that the clouds were permanently overcast.
And you can have vegetation without seeing the sun.
Definitely. I mean, when it's a cloudy day, the plants continue to grow.
Look, I've taught this my whole life, and I find this very plausible. It doesn't say he created light. It says, "Let there be."
Correct.
He's a very special thinker, this man, Hugh Ross, PhD in astronomy, Caltech researcher, and has devoted his life to making the arguments for the rational bases of the Bible. His website is reasons.org. We will take your calls when we come back. You're listening to the Ultimate Issues Hour on the Dennis Prager Show. Yes, and I do remind you that it's a remarkable get-together, the CPAC, the annual conference, and the biggest politicians and leaders of conservatism in America. And if you're not a conservative, obviously this doesn't interest you. But if you are a conservative, just know that there are tickets available through my website, and there are a handful of tickets available, exactly 24, for the VIP treatment where you get to meet everybody, have reserved seats for every session, have dinner with Charles Krauthammer, Michael Medved, and Bill Bennett at a private restaurant. It's quite a thing. If you're interested in that, it's $2,500 tax deductible, however, and obviously it applies to a select number of people. But if you're one of them, just send Sean or me an email right now, because you can't get through on the phones. So that's Sean, SEAN, at DennisPrager.com, or Dennis at DennisPrager.com. I am speaking to a man I have great respect for, you and I go back actually to the beginning of my radio career.
That's right.
We were both 11. So I know you a long time, and I gathered respect for you from the beginning, and it's only increased. He is the president and founder of Reasons to Believe. He holds a PhD in astronomy from the University of Toronto and has been a researcher at Caltech, one of the, I guess Caltech and MIT are the most prestigious in America in the sciences. Is that right?
At least in the physical sciences.
In the physical sciences, right. Well said. All right. We're talking about Genesis 1, and his explanations of it are just remarkable and I think make a tremendous amount of sense. But if you have issues with it, as many people do, that's why that's one of the reasons I'm having him on. All right, so let's go to some of your calls here, and they're to the right of you and to the left of you philosophically. It's funny, and some may agree. All right, let's go then to. I guess this is inevitable, but we'll take it. Liz in Costa Mesa, California. You're on with Dr. Hugh Ross and me, Dennis Prager.
Hi, Dennis. I love you. I've loved you forever. And
thank you.
Dr. Ross. Dr. Ross, I'm so inspired by what I've heard of you so far. It just makes me want to read more of you and just learn more. And the first thing that I learned about you was this idea of Yom being not a day of 24 hours, but it could be, eons or however long.
Exactly.
So that it helps me as an evangelical Christian. I have to admit that the idea of a 6 or 7 day creation, there was always that idea that I had to separate myself from some great thinkers. So my idea is the one thing that I don't agree with is that the idea of evolving man. So where do you have the idea? Where is your
take on that one? Thank you, Liz. Thank you. God bless you.
Well, I'm with you on that one, Liz. I, too, don't accept the idea that we human beings are the product of common descent or natural descent. In fact, you'll see some articles in our Reasons.org website that if a mammal is more than 7 pounds in adult body weight, that's a species that will go extinct before it can experience any kind of significant evolution. If you look at the bipedal primates that preceded human beings, they're all a lot bigger than 7 pounds. Moreover, as you look at the fossil and the DNA evidence, we see that they exist without any measurable change. They go extinct, they get replaced. A good text is Psalm 104. It's a property of all life to die off, but God recreates and renews the face of the earth. So in terms of the history of life on planet Earth, it's not the result of any kind of evolutionary process. It's God intervening and supernaturally replacing those species that go extinct with brand new species. And this is crucial to deal with the changing physics of the solar system. You need different life on the planet at different times, but only a mind will know which life should be there at what time.
In that regard, it's worth reading the latest book by Stephen Meyer. What was the name of the latest book?
He's got one on the Cambrian explosion.
Yeah, I know, but what is the name of it? My wife.
The signature of the cell is one on the origin of life.
That was the first one.
Right.
Yeah. All right, I'll give it to you when we come back, folks. My wife is probably going nuts because she knows, she always remembers these things. I'll get it for you, folks. But that will answer that from a major scientist as well. We'll be back in a moment with Dr. Hugh Ross. Dennis Prager here. I'm laughing because during the breaks, I try to drive my engineer nuts. It's a project in life. Have I succeeded yet? Are you nuts? You're getting there. Every now and then I do get them. Hi, everybody. This is Dennis Prager, the Ultimate Issues Hour, and I'm having a great time. As it's like an intellectual party when you have Hugh Ross in your midst. And he is a University of Toronto PhD in astronomy, researcher at Caltech, former researcher. You're not at Caltech now.
No.
Right. And the president and founder of Reasons to Believe, which is, by the way, there was a rabbi who wrote a book, We Have Reason to Believe, and this I'm sure predates your organization. He was a British rabbi. I read it when I was in college, and it had a tremendous impact on my life. And the very title had an impact on my life. Wow, we have reason to believe? So we were given reason in order to use it to believe.
Right.
So belief doesn't transcend, doesn't invalidate reason. It's rooted in reason. Yes,
Right.
Louis Jacobs, that's correct. By the way, the book by Stephen Meyer is Darwin's Doubt, which we both heartily recommend, I'm sure. We're talking about Genesis 1, and if you have issues with it, and even I wanted things clarified, and by the way, they are, and it's bracing stuff, what Dr. Ross has come up with. All right, and let's go to some more of your calls here, and we'll begin in Lakewood, Ohio, with Steve. Hi, Steve.
Yes.
Hi.
Bible believer, and I've been reading Authorized Version for about 40 years now. I've seen the difference between created and made, and I've seen it in examples and things that are created and things that are made, such as my Nissan truck, possibly created in Japan, but it's made in Smyrna, Tennessee. It's all assembled there. Why would God just, if you could just take 8 or 9 big rocks and throw them out into space and practice on them and then say, oh, this third one here from the sun, this one works out real good for my idea, and start going through a few cycles and recreating and redoing things, and then finally coming up with a possible 6 days in Exodus.
Wait, so I'm sorry. So I'm not following the point you want to make.
That the words created and made are distinctly different.
Oh, yeah. This is something that Hugh Ross and I acknowledge. Otherwise, there wouldn't be 2 words. It's like murder and kill. They mean very different things. Any comments there, Hugh Ross?
I agree.
That's it. That's a good comment. That's a very important... for those not following, and I'm sure most do, creation is ex nihilo, out of nothing. And only God does that. There is no example of man ever creating, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
The verb is never used with man. Man makes, God creates.
Correct.
So when God makes man as well as creates, why do you think both verbs are used?
Because there's part of us, our physical bodies, for example, that are made from previously existing material. It's not out of nothing. It's God miraculously transforming that dust to make the human body. But there's something about humans that is literally brand new, created out of nothing, and that's the spirit within us. We're the only spirit species that has ever existed on the face of the earth. So that's why you got 2 verbs.
Yes, we are only the spirit species. Well, we're the only ones created in God's image.
Right.
Which is why, folks, I would save the stranger before the dog that I love, even though I love my dog more than the stranger. And this is a perfect example of where taking a biblical value seriously changes human behavior. It's the example I've been using my whole life in asking about that. Wyoming, Sheraton, Wyoming, John. Hi, John, Hugh Ross, and Dennis Prager.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. At least it's afternoon here. I had a question regarding the gap theory, which says that there's sort of an indeterminate amount of time between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2.
Yeah, no problem with that. But most gap theorists have this idea that there was an original creation, a gap of time, and then there's a recreation. What you see in Genesis 1 is God creating the universe. Later he forms the earth, and then he begins to miraculously work on the earth. So it's not like there's any change of venue. It's not like God said to Satan, give it a try, and then I'll show you how to do it better. That's not supported.
And by the way, there's no reason to assume there isn't a great time gap. From what if I'm hearing you correctly, between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2, there could be any amount of time.
There could be any amount of time, and it's actually addressed in Job and Isaiah and Jeremiah and Zechariah, that between God creating the universe and forming the earth, he was stretching out the heavens. He was expanding the universe. And it takes that expansion of the universe in order to prepare things for a planet Earth and a sun and the rest of the planets.
Let me ask the scientist in you, do you think that they will ever find biogenesis In other words, biology coming from non-biology?
No. I mean, in fact, when you look on planet Earth, we wrote about this in our book on Origins of Life, that we now have hard evidence planet Earth never had a primordial soup, and yet the origin of life took place here. That's one of our pieces of evidence. It had to be a supernatural event, because it happens in an instant of time. We know geologically the very first moment that we have liquid water and we got rocks on the Earth, we got life. And we got it in great abundance, and it got there without the benefit of prebiotic molecules.
So they have made... They'll be trying from now till the cows come home, and they'll never be able to reproduce that.
Well, look how hard it is for us to try to make life in the lab. If we can't do it, then why do you think nature's able to pull it off?
All right. Oh, that's fair. Okay, well, nature had more time, I guess they'd answer. Hugh Ross is my guest. Reasons to Believe, reasons.org. We continue on the Ultimate Issues Hour. Hi, everybody. I'm speaking to a scientist and theologian, Dr. Hugh Ross. He is the president and founder of Reasons to Believe. He has a PhD in astronomy from the University of Toronto and was a researcher at Caltech, and then went on to do his theological work, or using his science, his tremendous knowledge of the physical sciences, to make the case for religious belief. And I happen to admire his work, and that's not the only reason he's on, because I've had people on the show whom I didn't agree with at all, like the astronomer in Arizona who wrote a book saying that there really is nothing out there. So it's the Ultimate Issues Hour, not the Ultimate Agreement Hour, but in this case I agree with so much of what this man says. Gary in Redondo Beach, California. Hi.
Hi. My lucky day. Now, you know by your questioner that I'm not into the Genesis. I'm really not a student of Genesis, okay? But my question for you at Biola, and your friend Dr. Ross there could expound on that, is the seventh day. The seventh day, and the Jews got it right, should be Saturday. And Constantine messed with the whole system, and I think he did it to humiliate the Jews. I think he did it, and he promoted paganism by calling it Sunday.
Fascinating. Hugh Ross?
Well, I'm quite comfortable with celebrating the Sabbath on Saturday or Sunday, Thursday or Friday. It was Paul in Romans 14 that said, you who worship on Saturday, don't condemn those who worship on Sunday, and those of you who worship on Sunday, don't condemn those who worship on Saturday. Keeping the Sabbath is setting aside one day out of 7 to focus on the most important issues of life. Kind of what you're doing with this show. I mean, we need to stop.
That's right.
Our day-to-day activities.
Sabbath is Ultimate Issues Day.
I
love that.
Day.
That
right.
is exactly, by the way, what it is. That's why I don't read a newspaper or listen to any news broadcast on that day. I love that. What another gem from you. The only thing I would argue is that by keeping the day that God rested specifically, then we are announcing that God created the heavens and the earth. But we'll do that on another visit.
Sounds good.
Hugh Ross, it has been way, way too long. So we'll do this again.
Very good.
Go to his website, see all the books that he has written and his work, reasons.org. I'm Dennis Prager. This has been the Ultimate Issues Hour.